So I posted a video in mid-November introducing a weekly portrait drawing challenge that I would take on in 2021. And 2021 is here. So here is portrait number one. This and most of my videos, honestly, are essentially stream of consciousness podcasts. So feel free to put this on while you draw or whatever you do. I don't know. Since this is the first portrait in the series, I thought that I would make it a self-portrait. But if you haven't watched that video, this challenge will actually be focused around drawing portraits for people who submit their photos and stories. So if you're interested in getting your portrait drawn by me, check out that video for more information. And by the way, in this case, when I say portrait, I mean less of a physical portrait, like it won't be a literal face. I mean, it could be, but not necessarily. It's more of a, I don't know, like a representation, or rather my own creative interpretation of the subject. When I came up with this challenge in November, I knew that the first portrait I'd be drawing would be my own, and I thought that I would follow the outline I gave in that video for what to send in, which was a photo, a song, and an anecdote or story or anything else about your life that you wanted to send me to help me get inspiration, understanding about how to make a portrait for you. So part of the reason I came up with those specific requirements is because I already had a portrait in mind for myself. Like I had a portrait in my head for many months now. But what I'm creating here is not that. Here's the thing about portraits. You change so much over the course of a few months. I still love the idea I had back then, and I still plan on creating it. But I don't feel like it's a portrait anymore. Over the course of a few months, I've completely detached from that idea. And I've talked about this before, but this happens a lot with my art process. You know, the longer I wait to create something, the harder it becomes to create. The more time that passes between having the idea and creating the piece, the more I stray from the original idea in my head. And the more time I have to overthink how I will create it, and the less excited I become to create the piece. And I talked about this in my last video, but I spent most of 2020 stockpiling ideas. Not just in art, but like in everything. And what that means is that I don't feel like my art on YouTube or my art on Instagram or my sketchbook even represents what I'm truly capable of. I mean, this is kind of a testy subject because you know how people say like anyone can have an idea, but not everyone can write the book. I don't know if that's a thing people say, but it sounds like something I've heard before. What I'm getting at is that the ideas in your head aren't really worth anything. I mean, everyone has ideas, probably really good ideas. And the only reason I recognize that I have good ideas is because I make art. You know, I take the time to remember them because I think that I'm capable of creating them one day. So even though I say I don't feel like the art I created this past year is all I'm capable of, that may be true, but the visions, the ideas for the pieces, you know, that's the easy part. You know, that being said, it's also the ideas are what are unique to you. You know, being skilled in art is not, you know, truly unique. It's almost impossible to come up with new art techniques. And you can learn to do almost everything that's out there. It's your ideas that make your art different. Your own ideas are your talent, I guess you could say, because everyone has a unique view on the world and personalized interpretations. And even though vision and ideas are the easy part, they can still be incredible, if that makes sense. Like, this is a tangent, but I've reached this point where I don't take in much that shocks me anymore. Like, I view art, whether it be visual or music or a movie or a book or whatever, and I think I can think that's an incredible piece of work, but I very rarely look and think, wow, that's something completely unlike anything else, or even something that I'm like, I need to hold on to that. That is incredible. Like, something could have a really strong voice, and I can still almost feel like I've thought of that, or like I could have thought of it, even if the thought would have never crossed my mind, if that makes any sense. Like, let's say I take in 100 things a day, so like 700 things a week, which is probably more scrolling online and, you know, but maybe one of those 700 things I go, wow, that idea is fresh. I guess the word is I'd use because in its core, almost everything is recycled. It's the spin you put on it that makes it unique, and the voice you bring to the idea, and the way you bring it to the world that's new and different. Where am I going with this? Well, if I'm running with the idea that almost every skill, like in an artistic skill, like writing or painting, in any certain technique, can be technically learned. To be clear, I'm not saying it'll be easy to learn, but I genuinely think that you can learn any technique or skill with enough practice and dedication and the right learning methods. But what makes someone an artist that's actually an artist is being able to create the thing. It's not just the idea. How do you take something as temporary as an idea in your head and learn the skills you need within the time that the idea is still fresh for you to create the final product that you're proud of? I don't know the answer to that. I think many of our best ideas, or at least my best ideas, can't be forced to come out. Like, it's such a subconscious process. Like, I think most of my creative ideas, or most of my just intelligent concepts, I guess, are never planned out. They just flow out naturally in conversation or in a stream of consciousness. And what makes art, like art that inspires us for more than just technique, which, don't get me wrong, some people I admire just have managed to develop a technique that's incredible. Like many of the classic artists that we still refer back to today, we look at because they've managed to capture something that's new. Or, for example, there are artists, like musical artists, like Chance the Rapper, for example. His voice and flow is special. Like, you'll recognize him, and he can literally freestyle over any beat with some sax or gospel singers, and I'm sold. It doesn't matter what he's saying, it's technique, and it's your own special technique. But what I mean is that how artists create art that inspires us, or art that we connect with for more than just technique, is they've somehow found a way to capture that natural subconscious process. But that's what's so hard, because I think the act of creating art, at least for me, is so conscious. Like, art is the only thing that I'm fully tapped into. When I'm doing everything else, my mind is everywhere. That's why my videos are all over the place, and this recording is all over the place. I have ADHD and I can't focus on anything, which is a huge reason why I think I have good ideas, but also a huge reason why I procrastinate and why I never complete my ideas. And it's because I have a million more ideas that I also think are good. If I just decide to tap into that stream of consciousness, and I will never create any of them because I don't know which one to choose. But when I create art, like I'm talking about like painting or drawing, like the process of creating it, I am blank. Honestly, like, it's like a meditative state. I don't know what it is, which is great. I mean, the pure process of creating art, like putting pencil down on paper, is meditative for me and for most people. But what that means is that my ideas don't flow in the same way when I create, at least physical, like visual art. I think inherently that's something that everyone loses gradually from being a kid. That innocent environment where you just aren't thinking when you create. Like, you're thinking, but you're not. It's just ideas are constantly flowing naturally. Like, you don't have to think up things. And, now it's like when I'm drawing, no matter how much an idea meant to me, I will still disconnect and detach from the idea. And I just focus on the art skill and how I'm representing the idea that I had when I was in that stream of consciousness, if that makes sense. And art skill, unlike streams of consciousness, are something that can be very literally judged. I can look at my art and very clearly say when it's, air quotations, bad. And no matter how good an idea is, if I can't create it in its original glory, no one will ever know how good the final product could have been. And I'm slowly trying to get over this, trying to take advantage of the thoughts I have purely without thinking, and having thoughts or good ideas, trying to transition them to the art process. Instead of focusing on my skill when I create, my art skill, just creating an environment where I can create purely and there's nothing holding me back, and I can create a final something, whatever it is, that lives up to the ideas I have in my head. Here's a little anecdote. When I was starting high school, I was like a preteen, I would do oral presentations and I would feel like I needed to memorize every single word. And what would happen is that I would go up in front of the class and I would have no idea what I was saying if I forgot a word because I wasn't saying anything at all. I was just recalling a group of words in the order that I wrote them down when I actually thought the words up, which meant that if I forgot one word in front of people, I would forget the whole point I was trying to make. And I would instead be searching for the word I was missing instead of the meaning I was trying to get across, if that makes sense. Throughout high school, I got, I guess you could say lazier and lazier. Maybe, I don't know. But by procrastinating projects and not putting work into them, and not putting work into memorizing them, I was forced to go up in front of the class and genuinely speak about what I knew. And although it wasn't as organized, if I didn't have the speech memorized, it was more real, like this recording is, it wasn't searching for the word, it was saying what I knew. And art is kind of like that in a way. I feel like when I create right now, I am simply trying to create the vague outlines of what I can recall from the idea I had in my head. Like rather than creating with the natural flow and adjusting when things change, I am tied to this hazy memory that, I'm searching for the exact word basically. I'm searching for the exact way I had imagined it being finished, which adds pressure because I don't want to mess my interpretation up. And that's not how I want to create. So you're at this point in the video and you may be asking, so what are you creating then? Because I haven't spoken about that at all. Well, let me give you a backstory, kind of. I've mentioned this in other videos, but on the side, I actually am a freelance writer, and so what that means is that I have to be totally accountable for my own time. I have projects that are, let's say 4 1,000-word articles about vacuum cleaners due at the end of the week, one 3,000-word article about growing marijuana due that night, and one 10,000-word article due at the end of the month about a Civil War leader. I don't know. Essentially, my schedule is all over the place, and it's always changing, and nothing is due on the same day, which would be okay if I had any sense of time management. And this, of course, I've spoken about at length on here, especially in my drawing on the roof video, but that procrastination and poor time management skills also affects my art. It affects how often I create, it affects how long it takes me to improve, and as I've mentioned before, it affects what pieces get created, because like with this one, if I take too long to finally make something, I get bored of the idea. Or not bored, but it's no longer it's not in my head as much. I'm detached from it. So in late November, I got a writing project, which was a 30,000-word book on the history of Thailand, with the first 5,000 words being due December 5th, and the rest of it due January 4th. And as a master procrastinator, I completed the first 5,000 words the day they were due, December 5th, which sucked, because I had to completely research the topic, narrow down what I would write about, and write all the words within 24 hours, or however long I was awake that day. And I ended up pulling an all-nighter to finish it, and it was horrible. And then over the month of December, I very slowly completed another 5,000 words. And I got to January 1st, and I had completed 10,000 words out of 30,000. So essentially, actually, 1/3 of it took 1 month, and I had 2/3 of it left to finish in 4 days. Point being, if I hated that one day where I had to write 5,000 words in 1 day and I pulled an all-nighter doing it and it sucked, I didn't learn anything because I ended up doing the same thing 4 days in a row for the first 4 days of 2021. And I'm talking eyes frying, feeling like I'm sleepwalking, showering to stay awake, being scared to look in the mirror because like my eyes are playing tricks on me, exhausted. Why am I telling this story? Well, this weekly portrait art challenge, which I'm doing right now, is a weekly art challenge, right? And I spent the first 4 days of the week cramming in this massive book, and the 5th day, sleeping almost the whole day to catch up because I hadn't slept basically those days. And so by day 6 and 7, I was not only exhausted, but I couldn't really get over the fact that I procrastinated again. I couldn't get it out of my mind. It's that high you get from the self-imposed pressure and that feeling of accomplishment mixed with the feeling of guilt and exhaustion and thinking you've learned and never wanting to do it again. So not only did I not have the time to complete the original piece I had in my head, but like I mentioned before, I was no longer in the same space. I was thinking about the procrastination. I was thinking about how exhausted I was from the last few days. So instead, I decided to sort of create a portrait of what my life looked like in those first few days of the year. And as you can see from the multiple laptop me to the dangling eyes coming out of my head while showering, that's what the portrait became. I tried to run with the natural feeling I was feeling then. And as I mentioned in my last video, I have trouble with art block because I stockpile all my ideas when I create art. Like I'm not in that subconscious state whenever I sit down on my sketchbook, and all the ideas that I had before I keep in my head. And so when I sit down to draw, I have no ideas because both my art process is too conscious and meditative, and both because I'm pushing down all my other ideas, saving them for when I think I can make them to the full degree I have them imagined. But here's the weird thing. This feels like one of the most honest pieces in my sketchbook. This piece isn't crazy creative or anything, but as I've covered in this video and others, the few art pieces I do end up creating usually don't get made until days, if not months later. And so when they do, they're no longer as true or real a representation of where I am. And if you watch my last video, I briefly touched on how I want to create whenever I feel like it. Like I want to sit down and draw whenever I feel like sitting down and drawing instead of holding back that feeling and holding back my ideas. And so this was that. This was a natural piece. It has little planning, mainly in the form of this sticky note, which I drew on a quick break from writing. But mostly the process was natural and done all in 1 hour and a half, in one sitting. And that's how I want to create this year. Not meaning that I don't want to create over multiple sessions or days or whatever. I just mean I don't want to keep my best ideas in my head. This year, I want my art or my work or whatever the heck I put out there to represent where I'm at and what I have in my head. And at the end of the year, I'd honestly like to feel like my lineup of art and work created represents everything that I wanted to create that year, and not just what I was willing and allowed myself to sit down and make. I think it's interesting. Something that I took from this week is how much someone's portrait can change in such a short period of time. In less than 2 months, my idea for how to represent myself is completely different. And I couldn't have even written this voiceover in November when I came up with this other idea. And that's, of course, due to outside factors and procrastination and internal anxieties and whatnot. And I'm sure I could have had the ideas back in November, but the way I'm putting them now, I couldn't have written then. And I'm not trying to go all New Year's resolution here, but I think something I did a lot last year was limit myself by boxing myself in with what I did previously. Like I wouldn't create a piece of art because I'm not ready and I'll start tomorrow. Because yesterday I wouldn't have been ready. And that's dumb because a skill can be learned. And even if I decide not to create the final piece that I had in my head that day, I could sit down and practice what I need to know so I can feel confident creating it. And hopefully the idea will change and I'll be able to create it when I feel like I can. Because, not only do people just change naturally and your skills improve, but you could also force improvement and force change whenever you want to. And so I guess the future for me is about getting it done. Whatever it is, whether it's a piece of art or work or a project, I want to try. And it's not going to be easy. Like I have years and years worth of procrastination ingrained in me, but it needs to happen because I have too much in my head not to get it out, and I have too many goals for the future not to get anything done. And I want what I create to represent that. And I'm never going to be good enough to do it, whatever it may be. But if I don't start and try to do it, I'm never going to get to a place where I could be good enough to do it. And if I start and just try it, the worst thing that happens is that I keep it to myself. I keep that try to myself if whatever I'm making doesn't turn out good. And when I plan for my life, like I was saying, I want to complete so much. I have too many goals for my future. And honestly, in 2020, it became hard to tell whether it was me holding myself back or the effects of the quarantine setting me back. And I don't really know which one it was, probably both. But if I'm giving it a true fighting shot, I don't think that should be a question. I don't really know what my point is here. I guess the motto is, as cliche as it sounds, I need to shoot my shot this year, Take a stab at everything I want to do, and I don't need to be tied down by what me did a year ago, or what I could do a year ago, or a month ago, a week ago, or a day ago for that matter. As self-helpy as this sounds, my self-portrait is constantly changing, and I'd like to be proud of that change. I'd like to be the reason for that change, like a conscious effort. I kind of ruined that little phrase. Let's repeat that. My self-portrait is constantly changing. I'd like to be the reason why it changes. I don't know. I don't know, man. I think that's the end of this conversation. I haven't really spoken at all about the art going on, but for this one, I used like water-based markers, like those skinny Crayola ones and the knockoff Crayola ones, and I stared at this piece for a while, unsure if it needed line art, which in the end I did end up adding off camera, and I had a lot of fun making this. I sort of referenced, I took references for the pictures in this, but it was really chill because I sketched out the idea quickly on a separate piece of paper, and then I used the sketch that I made as my reference, along with my memory, rather than using the photos. And so, because I was using the sketch for reference, it made the realism shift in a way that I thought was interesting. Like, I'd really like to explore that in the future. And I don't love how this piece came out, but that's okay. I got the idea out, and so you've seen it, and I can say that it's out there now. And I could take another shot at it if I ever want to create it again, but the final product will never be as close to the idea in my head if I wait. Like, you will only ever have a chance to realize what's in your head if you do it when it's in your head. And so on that note, thank you for watching. I'm really excited to create and post this year, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day.